Capitalism can never stay home. It goes abroad. The ordinary people simply paid the cost of empire.
So last time, we had ended with the Congo gaining independence from Belgium, only to immediately be thrown into chaos, as the Katanga region seceded and factions of soldiers mutinied, abandoning the new government. And you had asked last time, Jared, why was there all this chaos and why did they secede? What was the mutiny about? So this is a little more background on that because I had said I was going to expand on that further. This instability would last for the next 5 years and is now referred to as the Congo Crisis. The crisis ended, unofficially, with the entire country under the rule of Joseph Désiré Mobutu. Constituting a series of civil wars, the Congo Crisis was also a proxy conflict in the Cold War, in which the Soviet Union and the United States supported opposing factions. Around 100,000 people are believed to have been killed during the crisis. The movement that had successfully won independence was a nationalist one, and many issues, such as federalism, tribalism, and ethnic nationalism, remained unresolved. Despite the proclamation of independence, neither the Belgian nor the Congolese government intended the colonial social order to end immediately. The Belgian government hoped that whites might keep their position indefinitely. The Republic of the Congo was still reliant on colonial institutions like the Force Publique to function from day to day, and white technical experts, installed by the Belgians, were retained in the broad absence of suitably qualified black Congolese replacements. Many Congolese people had assumed that independence would produce tangible and immediate social change, so the retention of whites in positions of importance was widely resented. But again, this is all a consequence of the fact that the education had been designed to only keep the black civilians in a position of subservience, right? If you don't let the black people into positions of management and the higher education professional positions, none of this is surprising, right? Lieutenant General Emile Janssens, the Belgian commander of the Force Publique, refused to see Congolese independence as marking a change in the nature of command. The day after the independence festivities, he gathered the black non-commissioned officers of his Leopoldville garrison and told them that things under his command would stay the same, summarizing the point by writing, quote, "Before independence equals after independence" on a blackboard. This message was hugely unpopular among the rank and file. Many of the men had expected rapid promotions and increases in pay to accompany independence. On July 5, 1960, several units mutinied against their white officers at Camp Hardy near Ticeville. The insurrection spread to Leopoldville the next day, and later to garrisons across the country. So yeah, it was your first assumption. It was the first thing you said, Jared. Why did they mutiny? Were all the officers white? It's yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, that's usually how it is. Apartheid South Africa had a similar thing.
Yeah. Rather than deploying Belgian troops against the mutineers as Janssens had wished, Lumumba dismissed him and renamed the Force Publique the Armée Nationale Congolaise, the ANC. All black soldiers were promoted by at least one rank. Victor Lundula was promoted directly from Sergeant Major to Major General and head of the army, replacing Janssens. At the same time, Joseph Désiré Mobutu, an ex-sergeant major and close personal aide of Lumumba, became Lundula's deputy as Army Chief of Staff. The government attempted to stop the revolt. Lumumba and Kasavubu intervened personally at Leopoldville and Ticeville and persuaded the mutineers to lay down their arms. But in most of the country, the mutiny intensified. White officers and civilians were attacked. White-owned properties were looted and white women were raped. The Belgian government became deeply concerned by the situation, particularly when white civilians began entering neighboring countries as refugees. The international press expressed shock at the apparent sudden collapse of order in the Congo, as the worldview of the Congolese situation prior to independence, due largely to Belgian propaganda, was one of peace, stability, and strong control by the authorities. On July 9th, Belgium deployed paratroopers, without the Congolese state's permission, in Kabalo and elsewhere to protect fleeing white civilians. The Belgian intervention divided Lumumba and Kasavubu. While Kasavubu accepted the Belgian operation, Lumumba denounced it and called for, quote, "all Congolese to defend our republic against those who menace it." Meanwhile, as reported by Time, the Belgian paratroopers, quote, "beat up any stray Africans they encountered, disarmed and arrested Congolese troops, and even fired arbitrarily at Congolese citizens." At Lumumba's request, white civilians from the port city of Matadi were evacuated by the Belgian Navy on July 11th. Belgian ships then bombarded the city, and at least 19 civilians were killed. This action prompted renewed attacks on whites across the country, while Belgian forces entered other towns and cities, including Leopoldville, and clashed with Congolese troops. The Belgian government subsequently announced that it would provide for Belgian bureaucrats back in the metropole, triggering an exodus of most of the Congo's 10,000 European civil servants and leaving the administration in disarray. Engulfed by the disorder spreading throughout the country, most of the government ministries were unable to function. On July 11, 1960, Moise Tshombe, the leader of Kanakat, declared the Congo's southern province of Katanga independent as the state of Katanga, with Elizabethville as its capital and himself as president. Belgium actively supported Katanga's breakaway under Moise Tshombe, driven by economic and strategic interests. The Union Minière de Haut-Katanga, or the UMHK, a Belgian mining conglomerate controlling Katanga's copper resources, feared nationalization under Lumumba's government. Belgium provided military aid, advisors, and logistical support to Katanga to protect UMHK's assets. So this is not surprising at all. Like, all their privatized mineral interests are in that region, so of course they're going to support a secession.
They'd rather have a, what's the word we're looking for? A rump state or a lump? Is it the term rump state?
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to create a rump state where they can control the resources, balkanize it. That's very common. What they literally just happened to Syria. Even though Syria's technically still a country, but like, not really. It's like, you create a rump state, then you can much easier control its resources because you basically just have complete anarchy. The people who live there don't really have any control, and the government's just so weak, you can just step in and take whatever you want.
Yeah. And this is a little background on how they were able to do this, because that area of the country had already been managed differently by the colonial government. So Tshombe's party, Kanakat, was the Confederation of Tribal Associations of Katanga. It was one of the main political parties in the Belgian Congo and was led by the pro-Western regionalist Moise Tshombe and his interior minister, Godfried Monongo. It became the ruling party of the state of Katanga, whose declaration of independence sparked the Congo crisis. The mineral-rich Katanga region had traditionally shared closer economic ties with the copper belt of neighboring northern Rhodesia, then part of the Central African Federation, than with the rest of the Congo, and because of its economic importance, it had been administered separately from the rest of the country under the Belgians. Kanakat furthermore contended that Katangese people were ethnically distinct from other Congolese. The secession was partly motivated by the Katangese separatists' desire to keep more of the wealth generated by the province's mining operations and to avoid sharing it with the rest of the Congo. Another major factor was what Kanakat held to be the disintegration of law and order in the central and northeastern Congo. Announcing Katanga's breakaway, Tshombe said, quote, "We are seceding from chaos." So again, the major mining company in Katanga, the Union Minière de Haut-Katanga, the UMHK, had begun supporting Kanakat during the latter days of Belgian rule amid worries that the MNC might seek to nationalize the company's assets after independence. UMHK was largely owned by the Société Générale de Belgique, a prominent holding company based in Brussels that had close ties to the Belgian government. Encouraged by the UMHK, the Belgian government provided military support to Katanga and ordered its civil servants in the region to remain in their posts. Tshombe also recruited mercenaries, mainly whites from South Africa and the Rhodesias, to supplement and command Katangese troops. Although supported by the Belgians, Katanga never received formal diplomatic recognition from any country. According to them, the Katangese secession highlighted the, quote, fundamental weakness of the central government in Leopoldville, which had been the chief advocate of a unified state. So of course the Rhodesians would get involved, right?
Obviously.
And the whites from South Africa. It's like, not only is the pattern there and like the colonial, footprint, but they're literally involved. It's literally the same people helping each other out.
Yeah, I mentioned this on another episode, but Australians, there were a lot of Australian volunteers who went to Rhodesia to fight on behalf of the white government there. And they went to apartheid South Africa. And then after apartheid South Africa fell apart, a lot of South Africans came to Australia, white South Africans came to Australia. And you've seen recently, I'm sure you've seen on the news, white South Africans moving to Israel. So the fact that there's Rhodesians popping up in the Congo is not even slightly surprising. People who just love colonizing, they just love genocide. It's their favorite thing to do. So they just jump between, like these fucking Hitlerites, they just jump between different colonizer regimes, basically. Oh, man. Yeah, it's gross. It's like, it's insane. It's like,
really is just like a cultural mental illness. Like,
yeah. The fact that you can just be so addicted and you just love being evil so much that you're like, you know what? I'm going to go be a colonizer someone else. Like, you know, there's a common thing people say where it's like, you know, because I'm a settler, right? You're a settler. We're both white people in settler colonies. We're technically settlers. That's how it works. There's very common for people to be like, well, you don't choose where you're born. Like, you're born as a settler, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, that's true for like people like us. But when you're if
When
you're
you're really
born,
about it.
if you're born there, and not only are you just born there and you have, you don't leave because, it's too hard to leave or whatever, and you want to stay there, all your friends and family there, and you just get on with your fucking life. That's different. These people are like, I love colonizing so much. I want to go to I want to do a colonizing world tour. I want to do genocide world tour. Like, they're fucking disgusting.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's very good. Very funny.
Yeah, I'm very anti them. Those
So-
guys. I'm fucking anti those cunts.
yeah, that's the official stance of the podcast for sure.
Official stance is fuck colonizers. And especially fuck colonizers who just love colonizing so much they have to go on a fucking colonizer world tour.
Yeah, they gotta go help out the other ones, like sometimes
Yeah.
with armed force. Like, go fuck yourselves.
It's similar in the way to like when Trump got elected and he's like assembling his little cabinet and
Mhm.
stuff, and he's like trying to get there was some shit about Russell Brand as well. It's like, why is bro trying to assemble the rape engines all of a sudden? Like,
The rape injuries. Oh
yeah,
my
he's
god.
assembling the rape engines. Like, what's going on, dude? Like
That's
all the
fucked up.
all the rapists in American culture, or the West at large.
The fact that QAnon sparked this movement saying that all the lefties, trans people, gay people, everyone that's not in their in-group is a pedophile, but then ignoring all the priests, religious people, Russell Brand, all the people that they're actually putting into power, Trump himself, all the Epstein connections, all the actual people who are guilty of sexual abuse, which is like white men overall. Like,
All the QAnon people.
yeah,
Like a bunch of well-known QAnon like leaders have been found out to be fucking pedos. Like,
Yeah.
it's all projection.
mm-hmm.
All their accusations are just projections.
All right, well, I'll get back to let me get back to Katanga.
Oh yeah, that was a bit of
Before we
a
get too
bit of a-
far off the rails.
bit of a side tangent. But the point is, colonizers are the most barbaric people in the world.
Yeah, literally monsters, literally
And
grotesque.
every single thing a colonizer says about the people that they're colonizing is pure projection.
hmm
Every single thing.
So less than a month after the Katangi's secession, on August 8th, a section of the Kasai province, situated slightly to the north of Katanga, also declared its autonomy from the central government as the mining state of South Kasai, or Sud Kasai, based around the city of Bakwanga. South Kasai was much smaller than Katanga, but was also a mining region. It was largely populated by the Luba ethnic group, and its president, Albert Kalonji, claimed that the secession was largely sparked by persecution of Baluba in the rest of the Congo. The South Kasai government was supported by Forminier, another Belgian mining company, which received concessions from the new state in return for financial support. Without control over Katanga and South Kasai, the central government was deprived of approximately 40% of its revenues. Concern about Belgium's support for secessionist states led to calls within the United Nations to remove all Belgian troops from the country. The Secretary General of the UN, Dag Hammarskjöld, believed that the crisis would provide the organization with a chance to demonstrate its potential as a major peacekeeping force and encourage the sending of a multinational contingent of peacekeepers to the Congo under UN command. On July 14th, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 143, calling for total Belgian withdrawal from the Congo and the replacement with a UN-commanded force. The arrival of the United Nations Operation in Congo, ONUC, was initially welcomed by Lumumba and the central government, who believed the UN would help suppress the secessionist states. ONUC's initial mandate, however, only covered the maintenance of law and order. Viewing the secessions as an internal political matter, Hammarskjöld refused to use UN troops to assist the central Congolese government against them. He argued that doing so would represent a loss of impartiality and breach Congolese sovereignty. Lumumba also sought the assistance of the United States government of Dwight D. Eisenhower, which refused to provide military support. Frustrated, he turned to the Soviet Union, which agreed to provide weapons as well as logistical and material support. Around 1,000 Soviet military advisors soon landed in the Congo. Lumumba's actions distanced him from the rest of the government, especially Kasavubu, who feared the implications of Soviet intervention. The Americans also feared that a Soviet-aligned Congo could form the basis of a major expansion of communism into Central Africa.
How horrible. I hope not.
I know, wouldn't that be the worst?
That would be so horrible.
With Soviet support, 2,000 ANC troops launched a major offensive against South Kasai. The attack was extremely successful, but during the course of the offensive, the ANC became involved in infighting between the Baluba and Bena Lulua ethnic groups and perpetrated a number of large massacres of Luba civilians. Around 3,000 were killed. The violence of the advance caused an exodus of thousands of Baluba civilians who fled their homes to escape the fighting. The involvement of the Soviet Union alarmed the United States. So this makes perfect sense. Like, The Western powers were helping, but only to guard their minerals. They weren't helping to stop the secession. They actually wanted that to happen because they were opposed to the independent government, and they continued to get their mineral resources out. Even when the UN steps in, they do the same thing. They don't actually help. And then when the Soviet Union does offer to help, that becomes the reason for the US and the Western powers to respond even further.
It's almost like occupying, let's just say, a hypothetical made-up country that I have never heard of that doesn't exist, where let's say America occupies its oil fields while a bunch of smaller internal groups destabilize and destroy it from within, and then eventually gets overthrown.
It's funny because I don't even know which one you're talking about.
I'm talking about Syria.
Could have been Iraq.
Could have been Iraq as well, yeah. Well, I mean, Iraq was more of a direct military conquest by the United States. But Syria for sure. America puts boots on the grounds to ensure that they can continue stealing Syrian oil and just allow all the little groups, which they're funding, by the way, to overthrow the country eventually.
Yeah, great. Love seeing
Pretty
it.
remarkable how these tactics are kind of timeless.
But it's funny how, like, we're conspiracy theorists if we suggest that it's being done again, ever.
Yeah.
How dare you think that, like, Russia was provoked into an invasion? The American government under Eisenhower, in line with Belgian criticism, had long believed that Lumumba was a communist and that the Congo could be on track to become a strategically placed Soviet client state. In August 1960, CIA agents in the region reported to their agency that, quote, Congo is experiencing a classic communist takeover, and warned that the Congo might follow the same path as Cuba. Oh no, again.
That's really funny, that the way they always frame it as being bad. I
Mhm.
mean, obviously, from their perspective as
Right.
capitalist shit cunts, it is bad, but yeah, very funny.
Yeah, and obviously in retrospect to think about how great it would have been if that were actually the case. Like if all these people involved had been like principled Marxists and had like just had that kind of like line of thinking to be able to like nationalize their resources, to band together, to act against their colonizers and oppressors in a way that's like not just nationalist in nature. All these like ethnic conflicts that are like getting in the way of them unifying to expel all the Belgians have to be fomented by those Belgians for generations and generations, like since they first started colonizing, as we started talking about in episode 1.
Absolutely.
Lumumba's appeal for Soviet support split the government and led to mounting pressure from Western countries to remove him from power. In addition, both Dushanbe and Kalonji appealed to Kasavubu, whom they believed to be both a moderate and a federalist, to move against Lumumba's centralism and resolve the secession issue. Meanwhile, Mobutu took effective control of the army, routing foreign aid and promotions to specific units and officers to secure their allegiance. On September 5, 1960, Kasavubu announced on national radio that he had unilaterally dismissed Lumumba, using the massacres in South Kasai as a pretext and with the promise of American backing. Andrew Cordier, the American UN representative in the Congo, used his position to block communications by Lumumba's faction and to prevent a coordinated MNCL reaction to the news. Both chambers of parliament, however, supported Lumumba and denounced Kasavubu's action. Lumumba attempted to dismiss Kasavubu from his position, but could not get support for this, causing a constitutional crisis. Ostensibly in order to resolve the deadlock, Joseph Desiré Mobutu launched a bloodless coup and replaced both Kasavubu and Lumumba with a college of commissionaires general, consisting of a panel of university graduates led by Justin Bomboko. Soviet military advisors were ordered to leave. Allegedly, the coup was intended to force the politicians to take a cooling-off period before they could resume control. In practice, however, Mobutu sided with Kasavubu against Lumumba, who was placed under house arrest, guarded by Ghanaian UN troops and an outer ring of ANC soldiers. Kasavubu was reappointed president by Mobutu in February 1961. From the coup onwards, Mobutu was able to exert considerable power in Congolese politics behind the scenes. Following Kasavubu's reinstatement, there was an attempted rapprochement between the Congolese factions. Dushanbe began negotiations for the end of the secession and the formation of a confederal Congo. Although a compromise agreement was reached, it was prevented from taking effect as negotiations broke down amid personal animosity between Kasavubu and Dushanbe. An attempted reconciliation in July 1961 led to the formation of a new government led by Cyril Adula, who brought together deputies from both Lumumbist and South Kasai factions but failed to bring a reconciliation with Katanga. Members of the MNCL fled to Stanleyville, where, led by Antoine Gazenga, they formed a rebel government in November 1960, in opposition to the central government in Leopoldville. The Gazenga government was recognized by some states, including the Soviet Union and China, as the official government of the Congo and could call on an approximate 5,500 troops compared to the central government's 7,000. Faced with UN pressure, the Gazenga government, however, collapsed in January 1962 after Gazenga was arrested. Lumumba escaped house arrest and fled eastwards towards Stanleyville, where he believed he could rally support. He was, however, captured by Mobutu's forces in early December and then detained at a military camp in Ticeville. Lumumba's enemies feared that the camp was not secure enough to hold him and ordered that he be moved. The Soviet Union denounced the UN as responsible for the arrest and demanded his release. A meeting of the UN Security Council was called on December 7, 1960, to consider Soviet demands that the UN seek Lumumba's immediate release, his restoration to the head of the Congolese government, and the disarming of Mobutu's forces. The pro-Lumumba resolution was defeated on December 14, 1960, by a vote of 8-2. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba and two associates, Joseph Okito and Maurice Mapalo, were transferred by airplane to Katanga, the stronghold of his political enemy, Tshombe. He and his companions were beaten by soldiers during the flight. Once in Katanga, they were taken to a private villa where they were subject to more beatings by both Belgian and Congolese forces, and met with Tshombe and other Katangan officials. Lumumba and his associates were then executed by a Katangan firing squad under Belgian supervision and in the presence of Katangan and Belgian officials and officers. The bodies were then thrown into shallow graves. A Katangan government official later ordered that the bodies disappear. At that point, a Belgian police officer led a group that searched for the graves, dug up the bodies, hacked them to pieces, and dissolved as much of the body parts as they could in sulfuric acid. Anything that remained was set on fire.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
It's just so fucked when you think about people who just wanted, better for their country and better for their people, and then the price they pay for that is to be unjustly put on trial and then killed.
Yeah.
You think about how lucky, how much luckier we have it these days, where we don't have any kind of struggles like that, Some people just get put on fake trials and killed, and that's the end of your life. And for the crime of wanting to improve your country, and it doesn't align with the interests of the imperialist class.
Yeah.
It's just so fucking sad, man.
I mean, you say we're in a better time, but try whistleblowing on Boeing.
Well, yeah, better time. I guess a better time, unless you whistleblow on Boeing. That is a very good point.
Although there were rumors of Lumumba's death after it occurred, no official word was released for almost a month. When the Katangan government did announce it on February 13th, they claimed that Lumumba had escaped from their custody and had been found and killed by angry villagers. This version of events was disputed almost immediately and provoked protests around the world, and questions about the circumstances surrounding his death abounded in the following decades. Over the years, inquiries such as those undertaken by the UN, Belgium, and the United States, as well as carefully researched books, have shed light on the events surrounding Lumumba's death, and in particular, on the role played by those two countries, particularly Belgium. Notable are the 1975 Church Committee U.S. Congressional Report, the Belgian government investigation that concluded in 2002, and the assassination of Lumumba in 1999, written by Ludo de Witt, a Belgian historian and sociologist, which spurred the Belgian government's inquiry. Both countries considered Lumumba to be a political threat and had plots ready to assassinate him, although those plans were not carried out. Both countries knew of the danger posed to Lumumba should he be moved to the secessionist Katanga province and knew that it was happening, yet they did not intervene or raise any alarms, and both countries supported the Congolese parties who wanted to eliminate Lumumba. The last thing I'll touch on here about Lumumba is, this is an article from NPR in 2022. Belgium returned a single tooth to the Congo this week. Here's why. This week, an unlikely artifact has been returned to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and along with its return is the hope that there will be some closure for those subjected to a gruesome chapter of European colonialism. The object, a tooth that had once belonged to Patrice Lumumba, and is now all that remains of the Democratic Republic of the Congo's first democratically elected prime minister. Lumumba was known as a charismatic leader whose reputation inspired hope for independence throughout Africa in the 20th century. He first took power when the Congo gained independence from Belgium in 1960. Months later, however, Lumumba was assassinated after a Belgian-supported coup. He was tortured and executed, and his body dissolved in acid. One Belgian police officer took this tooth as a memento back to his country. On Monday, Belgium's prime minister returned that tooth to Lumumba's family in a ceremony that took place in Brussels. This photo from...
Sorry.
Yeah. Your face is like, it's what we've been saying all along. These white people are horrifying.
They're fucking barbarians. Like, what the fuck do you... Why did you keep his fucking tooth?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? What is wrong with you? I mean, this is a very common thing. You know, it's like a narcissist. Any accusation from a narcissist is usually a, what's the word I'm looking for? A confession. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, they'll constantly say, oh, these native peoples, they're savages, they're barbaric, they're whatever. And it's like, bro, that's you. Yeah. That's the colonizers. Why are you keeping trophies of people that you've killed?
Why are you always dismembering people? Like,
yeah. And then the whole thing with like Like, I'll draw this to a different example in history, right? So, like, during the genocide of Indian people in, the North America.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole thing with, scalping, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. You know who was scalping?
Of course,
who
that was
was
invented by white people. I never
who
even
it
knew that,
was?
but of course, yeah.
Yeah. Scalping was a white. Okay. So here's how it worked, right? Scalping was not an Indian thing. Scalping was a white person thing because the government paid the American federal and local governments at the time would pay you per Indian scalp that you brought to them. You would
Mhm.
get paid. You would get paid for massacring women, children, destroying entire villages, killing lots of people. You take their scalps as proof and you just show up and you get money for it.
Yeah.
That's how fucking barbaric colonizers are. And it's like history always flips it, where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
actually, the people who were scalping were the Indians. And it's like, well, no, they weren't. I mean, they were, but that was in response to you doing it to them.
Right.
And it actually resulted, because I'm getting this information from a book that everyone should read, An Indigenous People's History of the United States.
Oh,
Fucking incredible book. Absolutely incredible book. It actually led to this phenomena of white people would actually, just to get money, they would start killing white people. They would kill slaves. They would kill anyone and hand in the scalps and say this was a Indian scalp.
Mhm. Yeah, how can you tell?
How can you tell? No, you can't tell. So, yeah, that's the barbarity. And then this fucking Belgian officer is taking the tooth of Patrice Lumumba as a trophy. Just fucking disgusting, irredeemable people. That's all that can be said about them.
Yeah.
The colonizer, truly vile. Hitler before Hitler.
Yeah. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I'll just finish up with this article here.
Yeah, there's nothing to say. It's just like,
You're right,
it's
dead on.
just fucking astounding. Whenever I hear, I don't know why I get surprised every time, but when I hear someone's kept some trophy or something of an innocent victim, it's just like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, it's terrible. But I'll just finish up this NPR article here. So they continue. Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo said the Belgian government accepted, quote, moral responsibility for the crime of Lumumba's assassination. How about actual responsibility?
Yeah, moral responsibility.
They knew he was going to do that. Quote, a man was murdered for his political convictions, for his ideals. As a Democrat and a liberal, I cannot accept this, end quote. The Brussels Times reported him saying. How diplomatic. At the ceremony, Lumumba's daughter Juliana thanked the Belgian king and his government for returning her father's remains. That sucks for her to even have to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to thank, you don't owe them your thanks, but I understand why they did it anyway, as a courtesy.
Juliana had sent a letter to Belgium's King Philippe on June 30th, 2020 at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, asking for the return of these remains. She said that the ceremony underlined Belgium and the DRC's common history and hope for its shared future, but she also mourned that key facts about his assassination were still not fully accounted for.
This small bit of bone and its shining golden crown are all that remain of Congo's first democratically elected Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba. He took office when Congo became independent from Belgium in 1960. But just a few months later, he was taken hostage, tortured, and executed, his body dissolved in acid. A Belgian police officer took the remaining tooth as a memento back to his country. In a ceremony today, Belgium's Prime Minister returned the tooth to Lumumba's family. Georges Nzongola Ntalaja is a Congolese historian who participated in the independence movement led by Lumumba. He also serves as Congo's representative to the UN, and he says Lumumba still holds deep importance for Congolese people today.
Patrice Lumumba was a charismatic leader and a person who could really mobilize people to fight for independence. He created the first all-Congolese political party and was a person who was very much committed to improving the livelihood of Congolese people. We celebrate January 17th is Lumumba Day, so he's very well known.
What was it like for you to fight for independence as part of his movement in the late 1950s?
Well, I was a young boy in high school, and we were all very, very excited by the struggle for independence, and to hear leaders like Lumumba who were really speaking what most people thought about and who were not shy to say the truth in terms of the colonial oppression we went through. So it was a wonderful event.
Let's listen to some of what his daughter Juliana said at today's ceremony in Belgium.
Père, comment es-tu mort? On ne sait pas.
She's saying, Father, how did you die? We don't know. When did you die? We don't know. Where were you assassinated? We don't know that either. And so tell us what we do know about why Lumumba was assassinated.
Because the West did not like him, President Eisenhower of the United States gave order to the CIA to assassinate him at the meeting of the National Security Council on August 18, 1960, by the simple expression, "Can't we get rid of that guy?" But Allen Dulles, the CIA boss, understood exactly what the president meant.
What was their fundamental objection to him?
Basically, was a nationalist who wanted to use Congolese resources for the well-being and development of Congolese people.
As opposed to for the exploitation and use of the West.
Exactly.
Belgium's colonization of Congo was brutal, and a parliamentary inquiry found the Belgian government was morally responsible for the assassination of Lumumba. The Belgian Prime Minister and royal family have expressed regret, but stopped short of a full apology. What do you make of that?
Well, I would personally, I'm not speaking for the government, speaking for myself. I would prefer that the Belgian government owes up to its political responsibility in the killing of Lumumba. He was sent to Lubumbashi by the government in Kinshasa on the request of the Belgians. And he was killed by a Belgian assassination squad. So Belgium has a responsibility in the killing of Lumumba, and they ought to owe up to that responsibility.
Now, I said that the return of his tooth to DRC brings some closure to this chapter of history. How much closure is it really?
For the family, it's one thing that they have a place where they can go. Also for the Congolese people, we have a mausoleum where this tooth is going to be laid to rest. And this would be a very, very good thing in terms of having a place of remembrance, a place where Congolese can go and honor Lumumba.
But you can see how this works, where Mobutu executes this coup because just the involvement of the Soviet Union spooks the Americans and the rest of the West so much that they start getting involved. But throughout this whole process, it's like the West, despite having been the colonizers, are still seen as like legitimate actors in this whole scenario, despite their obvious interest in maintaining their profits and their, resources and everything. Whereas the Soviet Unions are seen as bad actors, and then they're like the first to be expelled, even though they were the only ones that were helping legitimate Lumumba's government, right? It just speaks to the Western bias of the whole process. Like the UN gets involved, but they feel like they can't actually expel or even fight any of the troops that the Belgians are sending, because they say that would infringe on the Congo's sovereignty and that would risk breaking our impartiality.
Yeah, God.
Whereas like the coup expels the Soviets, and then the UN backs all that process up. You can just see how all the white countries and the Western countries side with each other and against the Soviet Union, and also against the Black Liberation.
It's just really funny. They'd be like, hey, we're the good guys doing the good thing. And and the UN is like, nope. Like, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. But like, the UN was very much always just an arm of, the Western countries, more or less. The fact that Russia and China were even allowed a seat on the Security Council was purely just because they were too powerful to not put on the Security Council. Otherwise, there was no way they would have put them on there. Yeah, the UN has always been and always will be an extension of Western imperial power.
Yeah.
At the very worst, and at the very best, it'll just be toothless and be able to do fucking nothing.
Yeah.
Which is always fun.
Yeah. But that's all I have for tonight. But I believe that essentially sets all the background for the Congo crisis and then the dictatorship under Mobutu that lasts until the 90s. So
no,
it's like episodes 1, 2, and 3 covered like a century or more in each of them. And then this one's going to be like a couple decades. So it's one of those times.
Look, sometimes decades happen in, decades happen in weeks. And
all
weeks
those things.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the quote. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I will see you in the Discord as always, and see everybody else next time. It's all
awesome. I'll talk to you later, bro.